if I had to pick a single character that at the end of the day does kind of feel like they sort of emerge as like a central figure, it's got to be the priest. We end with the priest's heroic death. It's in effect a kind of martyrdom, and it reminded me a lot of the priest character that we encounter in By the Waterfront. Is that
right?
Yeah.
On the waterfront.
Yeah, right, on the waterfront. Because we're getting a portrait of a priest who is not only very concerned about the plight of the needy, of the city, of the resistance fighters or the poor, but is also primarily a spiritual pastor. We see him, in the church leading people in prayer. We see him talking about repentance and the need for forgiveness, and how this present occupation may be a scourge permitted by the Lord for past transgressions, and so it's like the priest character in On the Waterfront. His sort of social engagement, if we want to call it that, is not sort of at the expense of or in spite of his pastoral leadership and his being a spiritual father. And it's that kind of integrated vision of a priest character that I think is one thing that we so much enjoyed about the priest depicted in On the Waterfront, but also here kind of emerges as being so compelling, and sort of unites a lot of the spiritual drama that's present in the film. And this is maybe somewhere where I feel like it isn't purely neorealist, because we get these sort of characters who sort of like in the person of the cabaret dancer, or in Francesco, the another resistance fighter who's going to be married the next day. They're giving these sort of almost they're like these spiritual existential themes that they become the mouthpieces for, and so there's this spiritual commentary and struggle that's taking place through the film, and that kind of finds its unifying logic in the death of this priest.
Yeah, I too was struck by the degree, the non-realist aspects of the film. We talked about the way the film is shot. That's definitely the way, the view, the non-romanticized view of Rome. That's obviously more in the neorealist line. They also had real German prisoners working as some of the extras, German soldiers in the film. But in terms of the story, it did feel like as much melodrama and suspense as neorealism. And, a lot of the main characters are played by professional actors, unlike in some of the other neorealist works we've discussed. And some big stars, Anna Magnani in the character of Pina, and above all, Aldo Fabrizi, who was a beloved comic actor, and he actually played the sort of over-the-top warlord character in The Flowers of St. Francis.
Oh, I thought I recognized him.
Yeah, and he's playing a very serious role in this film, although not entirely without comedy in a couple of moments, especially early on. This Father Don Pietro, who is based on a real priest, a couple of different real priests, I think, but mainly this one, Don Morosini, who was killed by the Nazis. And he, to me, what sets the story aside from like a standard war or suspense film or melodrama is this character of Don Pietro, because for me he is the one who sort of vivifies the other characters, and he allows us to have hopes for them that transcend the circumstances of a wartime thriller, because of this spiritual light that he brings to things. I mean, even, like you mentioned, James, you alluded to the scene where he and Pina are talking about the occupation, and he suggests that maybe it is a punishment for past sins, which in the context of the conversation, Pina has been talking about how she wants to go to confession because she's about to get married, but she's already with child. But more broadly, you can maybe see this as like sort of a broad reference to the fact of, Italians themselves having supported this fascist fascist regime. I mean, it's not mentioned explicitly, but you can imagine that maybe that's one thing that Italy is now being punished for with this Nazi occupation. You know, Don Pietro is such a fantastic performance by Aldo
Totally.
Fabrizi.
Totally.
Just really great. And he's like a mix between, you know, it's interesting because he doesn't, when you first see him, he doesn't look like heroic. You know,
Totally.
like the priest in On the Waterfront looks,
Exactly.
you know, it looks more like a, you know, kind of handsome, manly, you know, Don Fabrizio, not Don Fabrizio, that's from The Leopard. Aldo Fabrizi as Don Pietro is, you know, he looks like he's a little chubby and kind of, you know, he's got this comedian's face. And at the first, he's playing sort of almost like a Don Bosco character playing soccer with the boys, and you know, he just gets getting so wrapped up in the game, you know,
Right.
and then, you know, also this, you know, this aspect of heroism that is sort of developed, and this sort of knowing how to work his way through these dicey situations, and then keeping so cool, you know, at the end of the film. I love the greatest line. My favorite line is you know, he's talking to the Gestapo officer about the impending torture of Manfredi, and Don Pietro says, "He won't talk. I'll pray for him," with like just the utmost confidence,
Yeah.
you know,
Oh my
in the
gosh.
power of his prayers.
Yeah,
and it's
that
just
was
such
so
a great,
awesome.
yeah. And I also wanted to, there's this great film critic, Tag Gallagher, who did a video essay on this film, and he said this beautiful line. He said, "The major," meaning the Gestapo guy, "the major knows all about Manfredi except who he is inside." Meaning he knows his communist history, things that the priest doesn't even know about him. And then he says, "The priest knows nothing about him except for what's inside." Which I think is like a very beautiful, you know, statement about how this priest is able to have solidarity with this communist.
Wow. Yeah, the casting is so spot on, because you first see this priest and you're like, okay, yeah, I know this priest. You know, he looks like the kind of unassuming, slightly chubby parish priest that we're all familiar with. And I think it's such a critical move when Rossellini has him break his glasses when he's pushed into his cell. And so now he can no longer wear his glasses, and it's like a Princess Diaries moment or something like that. Like, now he's taken off the glasses, and now he's the heroic martyr priest who is going to get this amazing. He's going to get this amazing close up shot of his you know, almost despair at the death of Manfredi, tears running down his face, and his
Cursing.
Yeah, you know, it's amazing, the kind of the transformation that just such a simple gesture is able to affect.
Yeah.
It's interesting that
hilarious.
he's such a he's so stalwart in that whole. He's actually always, even in that moment when the Nazis are going through the building, and you know, they're any moment they're going to be caught with the guns, and he's such a stalwart. He's something of. It's interesting because he's just like a rock. Like, I kept thinking that guy's a rock, and at the very end, you really like, he is the rock of.
Well, his name's Peter, right?
Scene. And his name is Peter, exactly. And so I was thinking to myself, what an interesting thing that his name is Peter, and he, you know, through this, he is the rock that holds this whole story together.
Hey, it's a film about Rome.
Yeah. Well,
and we have, of course, the
that's great.
dome that's sort of lurking in the background at the end. So
yeah, we get these two shots at the beginning and the end, and they're from opposite sides of the city, but they both have the Dome of St. Peter's as their center.
I think the last little addition would be that it's very interesting to look at something that is made in a time where Catholicism still permeated culture. It's still the privileged language of talking about love, sacrifice, honor, honesty. It really is it's the way, it's the conveyance through which sincerity and goodness is brought to the fore. It's not as virtuous as as virtuous politically as Manfredi may be, he's not good. And I think it just makes me a little bit nostalgic for an age where people really, despite the fact that maybe they weren't practicing, maybe they weren't interested, or they'd abandoned the faith, but they still saw the value in that language instead of denigrating and making fun of it. So there's something about looking at a movie made in a country where, in the city, where, 1945, it's been less than a century from when the Italians wrested Rome away from the papacy, the city with deep, deep, deep anti-clerical sentiment that manages to still understand that its heritage of this language of Catholicism is so important. And so again, it made me sorry that today, you'd be hard pressed to have a filmmaker use those kinds of images and have them be understood by the audience.